Hello. Today I'm going to explore the themes of existentialism, loneliness, and masculinity in the movie Taxi Driver and the book Notes from Underground. To start with, I'm going to place us into very different worlds, but by the end of this video, I'm sure that they will seem strangely alike. One is in a yellow taxi in rainy New York in the 1970s, while the other one is in a cramped apartment in 1860s Russia. Although at first we cannot connect the dots between these places, once we hear their protagonists speak, we realize that we are listening to two variations of the very same human crisis, the one of isolation and the search of meaning in a world that often feels indifferent. Notes from Underground is a short novel considered as one of the earliest existentialist works. It was written in 1864 by the infamous Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky. The book consists of two parts, the first being rants from the narrator, and the other experiences from his life, with the latter being the main focus in our case. It portrays a couple encounters of a retired civil servant with a stranger, classmates, and a young prostitute, where respectively the protagonist finds himself unable to make himself seen, unable to build a connection, or purposefully hurting the young lady just so he can avoid looking weak. Taxi Driver is a 1976 movie directed by Martin Scorsese and written by Paul Schrader. It illustrates the life of a young Vietnam veteran who, because of his inability to get an actual office job, becomes a taxi driver in New York City. The story finds him interested in the company of a woman named Betsy. However, his excitement is short-lived, as his social awkwardness does not let him realize that bringing a woman on a first date to an adult theater is inappropriate and not romantic at all, and would ultimately drive her away. Her rejection exposes his violent side, and that is especially clear later when he embarks on a journey of killing the presidential candidate who Betsy supports, or when he actually kills three people in an attempt to rescue a 13-year-old prostitute, Iris. What connects these two works is existentialism, or the idea that life has no built-in meaning, no destiny, no script, no guaranteed purpose. Instead, meaning is something we create through our choices, our relationships, and our actions. If we can divide people into two categories, the ones who think and the ones who act, the underground man would definitely be in the first category, while Travis would fall into the latter. I say this because in the book, the main character often displays a motivation to do something, to bump into a police officer, to partake in a duel, to slap his former classmate, but ends up doing none of it. On the other hand, the violent outburst of Travis at the end of the movie shows that although irrationally, he acts. A common trait between the two is their ability to feel inferior and superior to others at the same time. Underground Man often states his envy of people's status of their achievements, while he still doesn't fail to mention that he is intellectually dominant. Travis too feels pushed by society, but believes that he is the hero who can save New York from all the scum. Moreover, we can say that both of them deeply crave human connection, but because one of them doesn't know how intimacy works, and the other humiliates the only person who showed him compassion, both of them get stuck alone. The theme of masculinity can also be explored, especially in the movie, where, once rejected, Travis decides to change physically and show his man side through violent acts disguised as acts of service. The theme of We already briefly discussed the behind the scenes of their failed relationships. However, it is also important to note that they didn't do quite well in unromantic relationships either. The underground man forced himself in a dinner with past acquaintances, where he only managed to embarrass himself through rants and judgments. Travis, also seeking empathy, wasn't even able to put his feelings into words when trying to express his disappointment of the failed date to his colleagues. However, there is something important that distinguishes Travis, and that is his need for revenge on the men who influenced Betsy and Iris. His failed attempt to escape the dirtiness of New York through a relationship with the pure and honest Betsy makes him eager to hurt her political representative. On the other hand, Iris, who is anything but pure, stands out as a girl in need of a savior, a role that very much appeals to Travis. Lastly, responsibility, or more the lack of, binds the two men. While Travis indirectly dismisses his role in the murder because of the societal praise of the act, in the Notes from Underground it's different. The protagonist blames everyone and everything else but himself for his failures and troubles. So, why do we end up sympathizing with these characters? I think it's because there is something painfully human in them, and that they represent the things that we might sometimes think but never dare to admit out loud. We too often feel lonely or out of place. We too want to belong and understand our purpose. However, I believe that no matter how familiar or close to us they feel, the message remains that we must not become them. We must not fully live in our minds. We must not lose our connection to reality and compassion. Together, these stories warn us that isolation, when left unbothered, can manipulate our thinking, our morals, and even our understanding of ourselves. They remind us that meaning cannot be created through violence and overthinking, but rather connection and empathy. These characters perhaps stay with us because they represent both the roads we could take and the roads we should run from. They show us the worst possibilities that emerge when existential loneliness is left to grow. But by showing us these extremes, they encourage us to choose differently, to reach outward instead of retreat inward, to think without hiding, and to act without harming. Thank you.